Welcome to episode 11 of the Helpful Huddle podcast. Thank you so much for listening in today. In our episode today, I get the opportunity to interview Paul Bengds. He is a really good friend of mine and someone I have actually gotten to personally work beside and with. You're in for a treat as we dive into his story and how he has helped so many people. Hopefully, you'll learn a little bit about the cardiovascular health along the way. So turn your volume up, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Welcome back to the Helpful Huddle podcast. I am your host, Luke, and I'm actually sitting here with a very good friend of mine, Paul. Paul, say hi to the people.
How you doing?
And Paul, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't 100% know how to pronounce your last name. I think it's Bengds,
Yeah, it's kind of like the bangs on your forehead, basically, is how most people say it.
but how is it supposed to be said?
Well, I think the question is how is it supposed to be spelled and pronounced, which is all in another country over in the Nordic countries. And when my grandparents got here, they misspelled the name, and he kind of was questionable whether he was actually supposed to be on the boat or not. And so he said thank you, and he went on his way, and that's how we got the name. And however got pronounced was how it got pronounced. So I think we're the only ones in the world.
Fair enough. Fair. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong way, to be honest with you. But it's
I
however we
love
want
it.
it, I guess, because we're the only ones with it.
There you go. I like it. Good for
Yeah.
you. But just quick backstory for our listeners, viewers, whoever it might be, of how you and I originally met. And like a number of people that I've had on this podcast, we met through Lifetime. Um, we actually originally met when I was a trainer at a club that we were just talking about that the club was ready, but the team maybe not so much was ready. Um, one might say. But we really actually started to get to know each other when we grand opened one of the downtown Houston clubs together. And you were the metabolic specialist, and I was one of the assistant managers.
Yeah, we did. Um, yeah, I vaguely remember meeting you at Cypress, but that was
Mhm.
because I didn't spend a lot of time with you. I spent a lot of time with a part of your team, and obviously
Right.
then at the grand opening of our Greenway Club, we spent tons of time together long before that club even opened.
Yep.
So that's when I really remember getting to know you and hanging out with you, um, and just seeing like wow, like the people coming behind us, the younger people, like, man, there's some exciting stuff going on.
And here both of us are not working for them anymore or in fitness. So there's that.
True. Absolutely. It's funny how that
But
works. When a pandemic comes along and it changes everyone in the world's life, I think we're part of the world. So
for sure, hey, I'm pretty sure in Moneyball they said adapt or die. So we adapted. Um,
absolutely. And
but
adaptation has a lot to do with cardio, which we'll probably find out.
exactly. So to preface what we're going to be talking about today is cardio basics, cardiovascular activity, things of that nature. Paul was, like I said, the metabolic specialist, which for when I was working at Lifetime, I would just say that you were the cardio guy. So this is exactly where I wanted to bring you on, and we'll be doing multiple episodes of this. We're gonna build off of each episode. But I wanted to kind of start off this whole interview and this podcast with kind of learning more about your story and what got you into being this I don't know if you're actually a cardio specialist, but I feel like you are because you know so much and that's all I know you from. But I'm gonna kinda just hand the mic to you now, and I wanna just
Yeah.
know your story and how you got to this point.
Cool. Okay. So I did not start off in any kind of health or wellness. I was always active when I was young. I did play sports, going up through most of school. By the time I got to high school, I wasn't on any real like official team sports. I did some club team stuff, and and then basically when I originally went to college in Phoenix, and but I was very active in a job that I always kind of had, where I was outside. I was climbing on roofs, climbing through attics, and doing a lot of things. Very physically active for the entire time. When I did move to Phoenix originally, like I had a bike, and that's how I got around. I rode my bike everywhere. And a lot of people know me because, I teach a lot of cycle classes. I rode my bike around in
You did?
Houston or wherever I was at. And people always kind of thought, well, he's like a bike guy. And probably not as much as some of those people that are out there doing, a lot of events or, rides every couple days and every weekend, long rides and so forth. But I do enjoy being out on a bike. And, and so that's always been a big part of kind of just me. I always enjoyed being on a bike more than running, for instance. So when I did a triathlon, I always said that yes, I run because at the end of a triathlon, you got to run. So so I did a lot of that as well. But coming up through that, I eventually moved to the East Coast. Met my wife, who was a big basketball star at the school that I went to, Liberty University. She became the all-time leading scorer ever in school and conference history. Took the team to the NCAA tournament all 4 years. Started a streak of something like,
Wow.
like 10, 15, 20 years in a row, something like that, of going to the NCAA. And her freshman year was the year that they started that and turned it around, and made their first
Wow.
tournament ever for the program. So she was always very active, obviously, and she's from Russia. And when we first got married, we did have a couple of bikes, and we went on rides. Sometimes she would run while I would ride. We moved eventually to North Carolina, and I was in mortgage finance at the time. Didn't really enjoy it, but I did enjoy the money. And then when the market started to crash in 2007 and 2008 timeframe, I was at a gym that was eventually bought by Lifetime. And I was teaching some group fitness classes. I was teaching things like Les Mills RPM, which is a cycling class. Obviously, it's where I started off. Um, really enjoyed that. And due to that, obviously was getting into things like heart rate, monitoring that type of thing, although not necessarily understanding everything that I was seeing, and not necessarily doing everything that I needed to be doing properly to see the results that one might necessarily want, but seeing that I was, much healthier than I had been. So it's very happy with that. Teaching other classes like body pump, core classes, things like that. So when the
Mhm.
financial crisis kind of hit during that time, of course, being a mortgage broker was not a good thing to be. You couldn't really make very much money doing it. So I was transitioning more
Mhm.
and more into the health and wellness sphere, and eventually became a full-time trainer with a predecessor of Lifetime. Well, not a predecessor, a club that was bought by Lifetime called Lifestyle. And so I was working there as a full time trainer for several years, and then eventually in 2011 we were bought by Lifetime, and became a part of that team. Through that transition of Lifetime purchasing us, was my eyes were opened up into a lot of really new, cool things that Lifetime had to offer that a lot of other gyms don't have to offer in the sphere
Sure.
of technology, in the sphere of understanding how the entire body operates, not just you know lifting and let's get stronger, or let's do a bunch of cardio and try to lose some weight, or whatever the general population thinks when they walk into a gym. This is what I want to do,
Mhm.
and maybe I'll get a trainer to help me, to do some of this. Lifetime is much more um, educational based, where you have to kind of like learn how the human body works a lot better. You have to start to put these pieces together. And if you don't, you're going to get left behind. And in some cases, maybe not even work for a lifetime anymore. Maybe you go back to another gym who, they just lift weights, or they just, do whatever they do. They
Mhm.
just provide an arena for people to get somewhat healthier. So during that, I was very, very intrigued with that, because I'm always somebody who is very into learning new things. I'm always reading things. And at that point, I'd already started reading some books about um, what heart rate and training have to do with each other, and had started to kind of understand some things about that, and started to kind of experiment even a little bit on myself, and to see some of these results and what my heart rate adaptations were going to be. Although at the time I didn't really understand what it meant for my entire body. I was approaching it almost like a Western medicine type of a thing of let me focus on the cardio or the heart, and that's something that should be done, but I didn't understand the entire impact that it has throughout the entire body. And I think that that's something that
Mhm.
I think you'll agree, Luke, that Lifetime is very good at helping us to learn and present that type of information to us. Um,
For
so
sure.
during this process, I decided that I wanted to become a metabolic specialist. I was turned down the first time, which if if many people are probably like me, that if you get turned down for something, it just kind of pisses you off, and says makes you want to do it more, you know. And so
Right.
I started to dive in even deeper on some of this stuff, and I started to literally spend every minute that I wasn't with a client with the metabolic specialist that we had at our club who was running a test, or with my client who I had signed up to be on a metabolic test with our metabolic specialist. And I started to learn
Mhm.
what it had to do with my training, and how it impacted it, and how I could get better results. And so that when that person eventually left and went somewhere else, then naturally, who was going to be that club's metabolic specialist? Right? It was going to be me, because I was the guy who
Yeah.
already had this passion for it and was so involved in it. And that's what I was um, encourage people to do. This is just an aside, and I think this is a big point with you, Luke, as well. Is follow what your passion is and what your dream is. If it's something that you're interested in, go for it. Yeah, and that's what I did. So I went to become the best metabolic specialist that I could. The thing about it is every time that I turned around, my eyes were open to new things. Um, how the heart affects the entire body, how it really is just an indicator in many ways when you're working out or when you're not working out of stress levels that are on your body, and how working out is a stress, but
Mhm.
how mental stress is a stress, how not getting enough sleep is a stress, how eating the wrong way is a stress or not a stress, and your heart rate can actually tell you a lot of those things. And so I started to learn a lot of those things, and I started to really just get deeper and deeper into studying this, learning who are the best people in the industry to be able to explain some of these things, like the Bob Seebohars and the Joel Jamiesons, and diving into some of their training that they had, and putting it together with nutrition. Like I've heard you talk about precision nutrition and so forth,
Mhm.
and it all fits hand in glove. And it's just amazing that when you're listening to a class from John Berardi on precision nutrition, how everything that he says completely agrees with the philosophies of these other people that he may not have ever met. When you're
Right.
looking at how the human body works and operates, to be as healthy as possible, and it's not in any kind of a conflict when you're actually looking out for the entire human body. So um, So anyway, so that's kind of how I got into the space. I just dove deep and I just followed my dream and my passion. I did, yes, some triathlons. I went as long as half Ironman. Um, Part of that was just because as you become healthier in the gym, as you become more efficient in your workouts, as you learn how to periodize your training better, whether it's periodizing cardio training, which most people don't do, or periodizing
Right.
training or whatnot. Um, you can become more efficient with your workouts and things like doing something like a half Ironman or even possibly going longer doesn't even feel very hard in a lot of ways because of how efficiently you can work at it. So, um, but that led me to a lot of really cool things in lifetime. I got to meet some of the most awesome people because eventually I got to travel the country. I got to
For sure.
open clubs all over the country. I got to meet people like Luke. I got to meet people like you've interviewed a bunch of people. I know a bunch of them, which is awesome. And a lot of those people,
Hmm.
well, maybe not a lot, but some of those people I would not have met. And I would be listening to your podcast, not knowing who this person is. But I got to meet them because I got to travel and I got to meet some of the most intelligent people in the health and wellness space. And what always blew my mind is because I got to specialize and learn and become really good at something. Um, and really what I was really good at was just learning how to test people and to understand their results and to help design and periodize a program for them. It wasn't because I'm some
Hmm.
great mind that can think. People taught me how to do this. I learned because I literally probably did. I was trying to figure it up today before we started this. Maybe I somewhere between probably 6 and 8 thousand metabolic tests. Hopefully by the time you've run
Wow.
that many thousand tests, like you kind of know a little bit about what you're doing. You know, um, and I saw
Right.
some really awesome results with a lot of people, but I got to travel around. I got to meet some of the most intelligent people in the health and wellness space. And sometimes it blew my mind that I got to stand in front of people that I know had much better degrees than I could ever think of getting, that are smarter than me in so many other ways. And I get to teach them. And I thought that was really, really cool. And it made me really nervous actually a lot of times when I stood in front of entire teams,
Sure.
got to teach them, going like, wow, some of these people in this room have master's degrees or, maybe even more than that, and here I am teaching them about how they can be a better trainer. So anyway, that's kind of a bit of my story. It's
Yeah.
kind of like more broad and glossed over. There's some bigger events in there, but they might come up a little bit here and there. But I'm sure, like you said, if we go through a few episodes, I know that some of them will come up because they're pretty integral, probably into some different realizations that I might have come across, or when I learned something along the way.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that, and thank you for sharing that because I didn't know most of that about you, and I worked alongside of you. Um, because when I truly met you, I knew you were the grand opening guy. So you had already established yourself at the very least, and then I
Right.
just got to learn from you, which was amazing. But didn't know like you started off by getting turned down.
Yeah.
And so and which is crazy, and thank you for, like, that motivational side of it, of, like, hey, if you're passionate about something, go for it, because you literally went from being turned down to do what you wanna do, to teaching it, and you didn't mention it in your, story, but I know you told me, like, you learned it and were so passionate about it to the point that, like, you were part of making a certification, weren't you?
Um, well, I got to work in. I did get to help with certain things at Lifetime, but there was actually there's another personal training certification that I also have been able to
Yeah.
do some consultant work for. Yes, and So I get to be a subject matter expert, and I got to help kind of, I guess, for simplistic way of doing is write the test questions and vet test questions that other subject matter experts wrote to make sure that they didn't conflict with anything, because you know that a strength trainer can
Mhm.
sometimes write a question that will probably conflict because they don't necessarily know, aren't a subject matter expert on cardiovascular or something like that. So we had to make sure that
Right.
that that type of thing didn't happen. But then yes, I was invited to kind of to help develop a cardiovascular type of a certification specialized within that um, um, national certification, and develop a specialized course for that. Unfortunately, I didn't get to do that. So many things changed.
Mm.
So
Right.
quickly. A few years ago, and I think I've probably, maybe have moved on, maybe beyond that at this point. I could probably be dragged in
Mhm.
for things like that because I would be pretty excited about it. Um, I
Yeah.
know that you're not a trainer anymore. I think I'm kind of a bit beyond, you know, that portion of my life. I did it for about 15 years. It's hard,
Mhm.
you know.
It's
Um,
hard. It's a hard life.
yeah, and 15 years was a lot. Would I work with people again? Absolutely, I would. But I think I listened to one of your podcasts where you talked about it is hard financially too, because when you lose clients for whatever reason, it changes your income. And
Mm.
that was I think was one of the hardest things, where I had to manage that for about 15 years, and it's stressful.
Mhm.
And because it's
Yeah.
stressful, you end up putting a lot of other stress on yourself, like getting up at 4 in the morning to train somebody, but then making the exception to stay late to train somebody at 8 p.m. or something. And
Yep.
it's just hard on you physically as a person. So I don't think I would put myself through that again, but absolutely would I do some of the other more educational teaching type of things. That kind of thing I love. Yeah, I would do that.
Perfect. No, that's awesome. I love that. And speaking of educational and teaching type of things, you ready to get going into what we're gonna call cardio basics? It's a working title, but now that I've said it for
Yeah.
the podcast, we're gonna call it cardio basics.
All right. I guess that's what we're going with then. Yeah. So if you put it out there and it's in there, I guess that's what's got to be, right?
Exactly. Working title, kind of. But but where I wanna go with this, like I said at the beginning, I wanna be broad, I wanna be general in the sense of like yeah, I mean, just it's like a beginner, like learning. I guess like how we all start.
Hmm.
Um, so diving kind of head in with it and like at the baseline of it, like why is cardiovascular health important?
Okay. There's a lot of reasons for that. But I think the
Mhm.
most basic of basic reasons for that is um, the heart's the most important muscle in your body. you know, um, if a bicep stops working or a quadricep falls off or whatever, you strain a hammy, like you can lose both of your legs and all the muscles there, whatever. You can't go without a heart, you know, and your heart it does a few things besides pump the blood and keep you alive. Again, it is I kind of briefly referred to it earlier. If you can look at it, and it's kind of like a stress meter for your body as well. And you can tell a lot about a person's general overall health by how their heart is operating. And if your heart is not operating well, it's in this system with all of the other systems in your body, and there's probably something that's affecting it, but it's also probably affecting something else. So if you've neglected your heart, you won't ever have the health, or really, for people that might be listening to you, maybe it results in the gym, that you want either, or at least you're shortchanging yourself on some of those results. Because you and me
Mhm.
both know that there's a ton of bodybuilders that really just don't do really hardly any cardio. They go, well, I get some cardio from lifting, and yeah, you do. Um,
Mhm.
but they would never, ignore a specific muscle group and just say, well, like, my calves are kind of on their own because they're on the bottom of my leg when I squat or something. Most of them, if they want to go into a show, they're going to do certain things for their calves specifically, right? Because, like, I can't have
Mhm.
skinny calves when I'm standing up on a stage or whatever, right? The thing is
Right.
you can't see your heart, but the issue is that a lot of, or what I'm trying to say is that a lot of bodybuilders would be able to, um, maybe even have a better result if they periodized and paid more attention to the cardiovascular
Mhm.
exercise, as well as, the other, all everything else that they're training, basically. And it's the same for the general
Mhm.
population. Health, we've seen that, like, it's such a large percentage of our population that is actually obese, not even just overweight, but obese. um, and
Right.
we're approaching this critical number of really, it's kind of, it's at the point now where somebody who's actually healthy is more not the norm, and people that are unhealthy are
Mhm.
the norm. And you always hear cardiovascular disease in there, but you can see it on the outside of somebody's body. You can see that their metabolism is not working properly when you're walking down the grocery store aisle. We hear all these excuses of this or that, and we will get into a ton of those probably on different podcasts, and things. But a lot of it comes down to cardiovascular health. They don't have it, and I think that's probably,
Right.
a long way of saying that, that's really why, cardiovascular, um, paying attention to it, training, whatever you want to do or call it. It doesn't have to be necessarily like I have to go to the gym and do all these crazy things, but it must be paid attention to, because most of our
Mhm.
society doesn't, and most of our society is sick in some way.
Right. No, and I 100% agree. And that's kind of a perfect lead into my follow-up question for this. And I'm going to preface it by saying, like, I feel like when people hear cardio, they need to work on their heart health, whatever it might be. The first thing that comes to their mind is probably like getting out and running.
Right.
So my follow-up question was going to be like, you say it's important and they don't have cardiovascular health. How do
Hmm.
they, or what are ways, but how do they get cardiovascular health?
Right. Okay. Um, I like that question too, and it really leads into something that I kind of like planted a seed in probably about 10 minutes ago in my story, of kind of knowing that this was coming to this a little bit. You may have, shot me a
Mhm.
question or two before as well, but um, like, I personally don't like to run, right? A lot of people think that they should go run, or
Mhm.
they should, whatever. Um, I like to ride bikes. And so I planted that part of my story of, like, I always rode a bike when I was a kid. I rode a bike all through college, to and from work, and to the grocery store, and wherever I want to go. Partially because I didn't have money for a car, but also partially because I really liked to ride bikes. And the grocery store was close enough for me to walk across the street, but I rode my bike across the street, even though I had to balance grocery bags like on my handlebars on the way back. And it was really hard when you had the milk on one side and it was a lot heavier than the bread on the other side or whatever. But, like, I would ride my bike because I liked riding my bike. I think I'm down to one bike here now. I'm about to add an exercise bike into my new workout room. Probably going to pay way more
Nice.
for one than I need to because I want one that's really nice,
Of course.
Yeah, but it's one of those things like, so we're going to have a little bit of cardio in our exercise room here that we're just finishing up in my house here. And the kind of cardio is like, we discuss like, do you want a rowing machine or, we've only got enough room for really one piece of cardio equipment. No, it's going to be a bike. I mean, yeah, we threw some other things in there just to give them a chance or whatever. But for me, I like to ride a bike. And so really, like, what is it that you like to do? You don't have to go run. You don't have, walking can be hugely beneficial as a great way
For sure.
to do 85% of probably what you need to do. Um, and in fact, you could probably turn walking into 100% with a few minor changes because there are some things that to have true heart health, to get all the benefits that you want to get out of being cardiovascular healthy, you do need to raise your heart rate a bit beyond just walking. You need to walk up some really steep
Hmm.
hills, or you do some things like that as well. But yeah, like you can do anything you want. Like I've invited your host here to go rock climbing with me a few times, and we will.
Yeah,
I know we will. We just
we
haven't
will.
gotten, yeah, But I enjoy that kind of thing, and and it's alternate training in a way that I get to use a lot of different muscles, but at the same time, when I get to the top of like some of the walls that I think that we have in our climbing facility are 55 or 60 feet tall. By the time you get to the top, that you're huffing and puffing and your heart rate's up pretty good. You can do so many things for cardiovascular benefit that you like to do, as opposed to like, I have to do it. And if you have to do it, you and me both know you're probably not going to do it for very long. You might think I
Right.
need to put some benefit. The doctor told me I got to whatever. But find something that you like, or at least that you like enough to be able to stay with. Even if it's, you like I said,
Mhm.
even if it's some walking or whatever, and start there, and then you can move on from there.
Yeah, I love that. And something that I was talking with Sarah, which I can say Sarah by her first name with you because we work together.
Yes.
But previous episode, the nutrition episode, but it works the same way here with you talking about like finding something that you like to do. It's the adherence side of it. If you're not gonna
Mhm.
like me getting out and I hate running as well, or I don't like running. No, I hate running. You may not like it. I hate it. Um,
I like it
but
for a bit. I don't like the first bit. Getting out to do it, I don't like. Then I get into it after a half a mile to a mile, and I enjoy it for like two or three, and I'm like, why don't I do this more often? And then about mile five, I'm still a mile away from home, and I'm like, I know why I don't do this more often, because this sucks. you know,
my wife
that's a
always talks about runner's high, and I'm still waiting to get that. So I
It,
don't.
there
I'm
is a
not
little
there.
bit in there. Yeah, you'll get. I don't know if it's a runner's high. It's just that this is actually fairly enjoyable at this particular moment, but the moment, it doesn't last long.
Fair. But where I was getting at that was like if if I was told that I need to start running, I'll do it for a month and then I'm not going to want to do it anymore because I just don't like it.
Right.
So it's fun. But what I do like, and what you just introduced was like, what I do like doing is I like walking outside and like just kind of being not in nature because I'm walking like through a neighborhood and listening
Mhm.
to a podcast. Like I do like doing that and making minor adjustments, like you were just talking about, like taking a route that has more hills or just
Right.
speeding up a little bit to make
Right.
the heart rate change and get higher. Those are little things that I wouldn't mind doing because I'm still doing something that I like to do.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the big thing is too is that is like taking your example of walking, and then sometimes taking those hills and getting that heart rate. higher, and really the key is substantially higher, and for shorter periods of time too,
Mhm.
not for super long periods of time. Um, but it's really kind of like that type of thing works because you're really looking at it already in the correct way of like how much should be of a lesser intensity, how much should be of a higher intensity. Because I didn't, you and me both know we've seen
Mhm.
people that like whenever they do cardio, it's high intensity all the time. It's hit training.
All the
It's
time.
it's like I'm going to get into that spin class, and every single spin class is going to be like to my limit. And if I'm not like mopping up a puddle underneath my bike at the end of every spin class, then it wasn't
Mhm.
successful. If I didn't feel like I was going to throw up on the bike,
Right.
and that's what was really hard for me to
Right.
understand when we transitioned to lifetime was really as I was applying the principles that I was starting to teach people in my metabolic sessions, and programming and periodizing their workouts is like, oh, I need to start periodizing my cycle classes. And you have no idea what it's like to take a cycle class in there that's used to mopping up that puddle underneath their bike and be like, today we're going to work on what's called base training, and we're going to be down at this like, instead of like this level of like hitting like a zone 5, we're going to stay like zone 1 and 2, and we may touch 3 for like a minute or two. And they're like, what is this? Like, I didn't come here for this, and it's like, no, you're going to get better
Right.
because of this, but but those are the mentality of certain people. Other people are like, I don't, just walking around the block is perfect all the time, or walking on a treadmill. I walk for 20 or 30 minutes on the treadmill. And we see those people in the gym. They come in and they walk 30 minutes on the treadmill, and then they go lift a few weights and they're done. But they walk the same speed every day, and you wouldn't come and
Right.
lift, for if you wanted your biceps to get bigger, you wouldn't come in and pick up the 10-pound dumbbells and do 3 sets of 10 every day for 20 years and be like, why didn't I change? Your body
Right.
adapts, your heart adapts, your cardiovascular vascular system adapts, and you'll get so good and efficient at that it's literally like doing it does something for you, but it's very little for you, just like lifting that 10-pound dumbbell.
For sure. And you touched on something that I want to make sure that the audience understands. And you were talking about in your classes that you would train like zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. Can you explain the different zones to people in the way that we talk about them?
Sure. So heart rate zones are they're kind of, I guess, what we've pretty much done for most, um, I guess most things that you read, most places that you
Mhm.
go, you'll hear about 5 heart rate zones. Some places use more, some places use less, and it really is
Mhm.
because that's just kind of how what we've assigned to the human body. We've kind of all mostly agreed that, well, let's call it 5 zones. Um, and a zone is just a way of saying like kind of like a certain amount of intensity. Um, so if you think of zone 1, it should be fairly easy. You should be able to do it for a very, very, very long time. And zone 5, you should be able to literally do it almost for like seconds. Think of like max effort to run and jump off a cliff because the lion's right behind you or something like that. That's like zone 5.
Mhm.
You're literally running
Mhm.
as fast as you can, and you can only run that fast for a very short period of time before your body literally can't deliver the energy that you need to continue at that pace anymore. Um, and then the other zones are kind of in between, where um, zone the top of like zone 3 is really kind of what we call our most people call our anaerobic threshold, and that's kind of where you're getting into that super intense area of I can't maintain this for very long because the energy systems that you're utilizing can't deliver the energy as fast as you're using it, where once you're below that, then you can, if you've trained well, then you can keep up. um, So, zone one, super easy. You could do that. That's like an all day thing. Zone two, not an all day
Yeah.
thing anymore. It's definitely more intense. Like I'm starting to feel a little bit here, but you could do it for a really long time. Especially if you've been training, you're probably talking in the neighborhood of hours, right? Zone three,
Mhm.
now you're talking for a well trained athlete. Maybe over an hour. And it's different for everybody. It's different on the activity. So these
Right.
are, again, really variable kind of things that we're talking about. And if we're talking about running or
Mhm.
cycling, or we're talking about swimming, or any kind of activity we could come up with, it's going to be different amounts of time. And it's going to be very specific to your training. If you train running and then I put you on a rowing machine, well, the same heart rate zones don't even apply anymore. You have completely different heart rate zones.
Right.
So zone four is wow, like I can do this for a short period of time. It's very, very intense. And then a true zone five is like, I'm gonna puke. I better get to that cliff or the
Mhm.
lion's gonna eat me or whatever. So that's, in really simple, easy terms, those are kind of just like perceived exertions of what those heart rate zones feel like. What your heart's actually doing during those times is either efficiently or not being able to efficiently deliver the energy that you need to be able to continue that activity. And the more that we train the heart, the more that it can fuel that activity, and the more you'll be able to um, continue a higher level of activity for a longer period of time. So I'll take a
Mhm.
minute just to explain that. So like a lot of people will go into the gym, the hit people especially, like sometimes people who go to Orange Theory or whatnot, they're focused on like, I'm going to get my heart rate to this X number or their orange zone or whatever
Get
it
those
is, right?
splat points.
Yeah, right. And so you know that's very similar to going in and like max lifting every day, right? Like you don't try to do your max every day
Mhm.
that you're working out,
Right.
you know. Um,
Right.
and so let's say that you're just like, oh, I'm going to start off being a runner. We're going to make Luke a runner now. Okay. So Luke goes out today and we're
Mhm.
Luke's going to run a mile. And when he runs a mile, his heart rate, just at running at 5 miles an hour, he by the time he gets back, because he's not very good at doing this, he's not super efficient at doing this. His heart rate's like 185, and you're in zone four. You're like, whoa, that was
Probably
like, that's
pretty accurate.
there you go. All right. So our goal is not to make his heart rate go to 185 every day, so that the next month he's running at 6 miles an hour to make his heart rate be 185. And then the next month he's running at 6.5 or 7 to get to 185. No, his goal is eventually to be able to run that same 5 miles an hour and have his heart rate go from 185 to 160 or 150, and then we periodize and we move him up to 6 miles an hour. Eventually, he can run at 8 miles an hour and still have his heart rate be way lower than 185, and it doesn't feel stressful to him. Because guess what 185 feels?
Mhm.
It feels stressful, you know. And it's just like when you walk in and you have that job review and you think I'm going to get fired and your heart rate's 185. That's stress. Okay, making Luke run is
Mhm.
stress. Um, you know, that's why sometimes when we eat something really high in sugar or certain carbohydrates or something like that, you can feel or a lot of caffeine, you feel your heart rate going up because it's actually stressing your body. So is what I kind of talked about, your heart being a gauge for how much stress are you actually under. And so our goal is to make things become less stressful, and then it translates to all
Mhm.
of health. It translates to um, just being able to sit here and have a conversation and have a lower heart rate. It translates to my immune system works a lot better, so that when I get sick, my body's under less stress because my heart can work so much more efficiently and effectively that it can actually deliver the cells that need to go where they need to go to fight the infection off and to get well quicker. And this is why you hear about healthier
Amazing.
people have much shorter recovery times, or maybe don't get as sick, or
Mhm.
maybe don't get sick at all sometimes. And that cardiovascular system has everything to do with all of those aspects. But it's also that gauge and that monitor, which is why Apple's building heart rate monitors into their watches, and we some of a lot of us have worn these from before the Apple Watch, like the Garmin's or the some of the other brands, the Fitbits and things like that. Um, the thing is it
Mm.
tells you a lot about how your body's operating. And I would challenge like people who listen to this, like if you don't have a good night's sleep, just check out what your heart rate is the next day. And you'll notice that it's probably something like 10 beats higher than it was the day before, just doing your normal activities, because today is more stressful than yesterday was because I didn't get any sleep last night. And that's just
Mm.
one of those things. It tells you what's going on in your body, but it also helps you understand how your adaptation is actually working as you become healthier. Am I becoming healthier? I was able to walk around the block and my heart rate was 10 beats lower. Man, you're doing a good job. You're progressing.
Mm.
Now, how do we get to the next step or whatever? But I don't know. That's probably a long way around of but it kind of, I think it helps people understand a little bit about what heart rate and cardiovascular health um, is, and just a really simple way for people to measure it, because so many people out there have
Mhm.
things like Apple Watches and Fitbits and things.
For sure. No, and I love it, and I love that answer because I mean, I could take it so many different ways, but I was actually taking notes while you were talking, and this question I'm about to ask, we could probably just do a whole episode on, so we'll
Probably,
be
yeah.
as
Like
general
we
as
can
we
do whole
can with
episodes on
it.
probably most of them.
Oh, yeah. But I wanna I'm gonna also kinda preface this question as far as, like, when we're talking to both, like, general population or that person that just wants to get like, their doctor's telling them that they need to get improve their cardiovascular health, as well as that person that is in the Orange Theory classes chasing those splat points. Like,
Right, right,
why is it important for us to speed up, and why is it important for us to slow down?
right. Okay, cool. Um, so it's it's very important to have both lower intensity and higher intensity for cardiovascular health and performance. Um, it's and I do like to compare it to periodizing, strength training. So many people know what that is,
Mhm.
and I start out, with the lower weight, and I eventually work up to less reps with higher weights and so forth. And that's super simplifying it, but eventually I get to, what's my one rep max, and then the next time I go through this, I'm going to have I'm going to be able to lift an even heavier weight, once I make it through my next cycle. It's a lot the same way with cardiovascular health, and the only way that we get that health, the only way that I could sit here and say that I was unhealthy and just sitting here on the floor, talking to you, my heart rate was 85, and then a year later my heart rate was 55. Well, what that means is your heart is stronger. That means that your heart can pump more blood with each beat. It doesn't have to beat as often, so therefore it gets to rest kind of in a way more. And it's not very stressful to your body. But the only way to do that is to stress the heart. The only way to be able to lift more weight is to lift heavier weights. You're not going to do it by always lifting a light weight. We're not going to improve heart health much beyond a very basic level by just walking around the block and walking around the same block the same way every day for 10 years. Nothing's really going to change beyond the first, well, I didn't walk around the block and I did get slightly healthier because I started to walk every day. You're going to get some benefits from that. But we have to put some more stress on the heart in short periods of time which means higher intensity bursts. And this is where things like HIIT training and so forth can be effectively utilized. The problem is that we don't want to do high intensity all the time because it's really stressful. Okay. Nobody wants to work out like
Mhm.
they feel like they're going to puke every single time. Well, some people might, um, but to be healthy, you really don't, but you do need to add
Right.
that intensity in so that the heart can start to adapt. It's just like your muscle groups. They go, wow, I got broken down in a way. I'm really sore. I'm going to build that muscle up better so that way when I lift that weight again, it's not so bad. And when I get put under that kind of stress again, then I know how to react and adapt and to lift that. But the same thing with the heart. Okay, the heart will get better at pumping blood. It'll pump more blood with every single beat. So guess what? It gets to beat less. So that when I go now walk up that hill or climb that mountain on that hike that I wanted to do, it's a lot easier than it used to be. The reason it's a lot easier is because your heart is healthier, it's pumping blood efficiently, it's delivering the energy to the muscles that need it to help you climb that hill. And you don't feel out of breath because instead of beating at 185 climbing that hill, it was only beating at 145. And to make it go to 185, you'd get to go find a much bigger hill, or you'd get to climb for a lot longer to get the heart rate higher.
Mhm.
I could go I only went halfway up that mountain before, and now this time I get to go all the way up that mountain because I'm not going to be so huffing and puffing and out of breath and tired that I got to sit under this rock while my friends continue on up the mountain because I just can't do it anymore. Um, that will have so many benefits for the rest of your life. But the thing is you have to have some of that high intensity to get that adaptation, to get that change that you're looking for. Just staying low
Mhm.
intensity all the time, you get some really great benefits from that, but you don't get some of the benefits that you get from high intensity as well. And you have to kind of have both, just like you have to have in anything else in life. You never really grow unless you're pushed. It's the same thing with your cardiovascular system. We've all talked about like, oh, that was the hardest time in my life. Something really bad happened, but boy, my life got so much better when that happened, and I made it through it because it was stressful.
Right.
Same thing with your cardiovascular system or any other kind of training that you have.
Oh, that's perfect. And then for anyone that might be listening on the flip side of that, is there any reason like besides or what are the byproducts of always going zone 4, zone 5? Like
um,
why do we
yeah,
need to slow down?
yeah, absolutely. Um, the the byproduct of that is like it's just really stressful to the body. So I think a lot of times people think of stress as just mental stress. It's like, oh my god, like my boss was on me today, and then
Mhm.
my kids threw up over the back of the car when I was driving home, and my day was just whatever, right? And that's coming for you, right? um,
Oh,
so
it is.
every kid throws up in the back of the car at least once. So good luck to you. um,
Can't wait.
but but that's how most people think of stress. But we don't think of stress as um, just that in a cardiovascular way of zone 4 and zone 5. We think that's good for us, right? But nobody would want that day to repeat itself over and over and over. You wouldn't want to go to work and have
Mhm.
the worst day ever every day, and then have like the worst family day ever when you get home, and not be able to sleep
Right.
because everything's so terrible. But that's what doing zone 4 and zone 5 is, like when you do it every day. And at first, like I said, just like doing a lot of low intensity, you're going to get some benefits from doing the high intensity. You're going to get some cool adaptations, and the heart is going to learn how to operate better under high stress. You're going to, um, there's some great things that happen, but you're going to start to break your body down by doing those kind of workouts
Yeah.
all the time. You're going to start to run into injury as well. besides
Mhm.
that, besides not getting some of the cardiovascular adaptations that you're really looking for. Um, there's you're just not you're going to find that probably over time, instead of improving, your performance is going to decrease. Because imagine coming in um, to work, and and you've already had the worst like 4 weeks in a row. Do you really think that you're going to perform better having a worse fifth week in a row? Like, no. It's the same thing with your workouts. You're going to start to realize that, like, I'm trying to run faster, or I'm trying to row further in 5 minutes, or whatever it is, or complete my 500-meter row faster, but I keep getting actually slower, and the body doesn't have enough
Right.
time to recover to be, and some of the things that happen to the heart at lower intensities are, um, you actually allow more time for blood to enter the chamber, so that your heart can actually practice pumping a higher volume of blood. But if your heart's always beating so quickly, you actually don't have time for any more blood to enter the chamber, because it's already on to the next beat. So some of those things only happen at lower intensities, but certain parts of that adaptation only happen because we put extra stress on the heart too.
Mhm. No, I love that, and thank you for answering that question because I think that's super important. And when you and it's just like what you're talking about with like the stress of like work and working out's the same way. Like there's a point of diminishing returns when you do it that way. And in the fitness industry, we would typically, or at least I always called it like overtraining syndrome or whatever you want to call
Mhm.
it.
Right.
Um, where where yeah, I mean you just break down. And that and I think of stories, and I think we've all at least heard one story of someone that, like, quote, unquote, "works themselves to death," like, works themselves into a heart attack because there's just so much stress on them.
Hmm.
So, it is super important, and, yeah, I mean, it's just super important, so I wanted to make sure that we highlighted, like, why we need to speed up, why we need to slow down,
Right.
um, and going from that, I want to go into, and I'm gonna kinda give you the platform because we're talking about earlier, the subject matter expert. What coming from being a subject matter expert means you get a lot of questions posed to you.
Right.
But, like, what are some of those most common questions that you get from people?
Um, some of the most common questions are always like, kind of like what you asked earlier, like, what should I do? Because a lot of people, like you said,
Mhm,
expect they should run, um, get on a treadmill or something like that. And that's definitely not what we're telling you to do. Like I said, I kind of already said, do more of what you like, or at least what you dislike the least. And a lot of people are worried about, like, where they start, that it's not enough. And honestly, like,
yeah,
just starting anything is good, even if you don't know how to do it, even if you don't have any direction. Like, going for a half a mile walk, or whatever, is a great place to start, because you've got to start to change that mental mindset. Not only that, but just going outside and walking, you're gonna get your heart rate up some, without even really feeling it that much. If you were to wear a heart rate monitor, you would notice that, well, great, I was sitting on the couch and it was, I don't know, 75 or something like that. And I was out walking around and it was 115 or 120. And that's already like a really
mhm,
great start for a lot of people. Um, so don't feel like, because I don't know anything, I can't do it. Like, just start. You can start to figure it out along the way, as you've already started. You don't have to learn everything before you start something. Go ahead and start, because
sure.
most people don't generally jump right into the high intensity of, like, oh, I'm gonna go run around the block 5 times. Um, one, you don't want to, and two, it wouldn't feel good. So, um, and that's not the place to start. And you could add some of that in later, even again without direction. You can start to figure it out, but you can listen to your body too, and it tells you, um, when you're overdoing it, and when you're not doing enough. Because when you're not doing enough, a lot of times you have just as much pain, or soreness, or whatever, from just sitting around too much. The joints ache
Mhm,
because they're not moving. and the heart's not pumping hardly any blood to them because you're not moving. So, but some of those are the questions that I get, and then from the gym, I always got a lot of the high intensity questions, and really, it wasn't even questions.
Mhm.
Really, more it was more of I think people looking for affirmation that that and I think we talked briefly about this right before the podcast started of of what I'm doing is correct, right? And a lot of people
Mhm.
see those diminishing returns that you just talked about. Um, and because they're starting to overwork themselves in some way, and a lot of times people are looking for an affirmation of, well, if I continue on this path, I will get better, right? And that is the time when maybe you do need to seek some direction. But it's the same thing on the other side as well. I do see it a lot of times where people will have other severe issues of like, oh, well, I've got a thyroid issue and I've got, um, pre-diabetes and this and that going on. So I really can't do a lot of these, activities, or my doctor said I really shouldn't exercise intensely or something like that. And I think I think they're looking for an affirmation of, yeah, well, you're
Mhm.
just in a bad situation and there's not anything that you can do to correct that. And I would say that that's wrong as well. And I think part of it is again, if you listen to yourself and that person that's sitting there and they're really not doing anything and they have a lot of those issues, um, you're probably making like your thyroid issue or your pre-diabetes or something worse by not doing any of those things. And I think a lot of people do realize that when they go on a vacation, and they are more active than they are at home because like I was out walking around Rome, or I was at this national park and I like walked around and saw the geysers or something like that, right? And they go, man, I felt a lot better. A lot of that is because you are
Mhm.
just being more active and getting up and moving around and getting a little bit of cardiovascular activity as a part of that. And I think that that's what I run into is sometimes it's not even people asking for direction; they're asking for the affirmation of like, well, I'm kind of on the path that I'm on, so tell me that what I'm doing is correct because that's kind of what I want to hear. I don't really want to hear that I might have to do something different because I might have to change my whole way of thinking. Like I either got to get up off the couch or maybe I got to slow down a little bit. And people who
Mhm.
are trying to achieve those personal bests sometimes, or trying to achieve really rapid weight loss or something like that, feel like I will lose weight faster if I go faster on the treadmill, as opposed to going
Mhm.
slower. And because it doesn't make sense to people, that maybe I do need to go
Right.
slower, or at least for a very specific portion of what I'm doing. But most people will naturally
Yeah.
fall into a rhythm of what we call 80% low intensity, and then that 20%, is moderate and high intensity, with the smallest
Mhm.
portion really being high intensity. Most people will naturally kind of want to gravitate towards something like that because we tend to, as a society, like high intensity less. I think most people.
Yeah.
There's some people that are gluttons for punishment. We know
Yeah.
that, but yeah. So that's
Yeah, for
kind
sure.
of some of the things I
Yeah,
run
some people
into.
wanna watch the world burn, like,
Yeah. Well,
no, I
yeah, and some people like that pain. They like the pain of being in the gym, and just barely being able to walk out the door, so
Mhm.
like, yeah, there should be a day like that once in a while, but it should not be every day. If it's
Mhm.
every day, then you're gonna have you know uh, you're going to have problems just like the person who doesn't do anything, different problems. But eventually they lead to the same place of probably, you not being able to do anything, sometimes not being able to manage blood sugar and things like that, because, you're actually training your body to become dependent on carbohydrates by training too hard. And that's an
Mhm.
issue that you can create with exercise, which most people might fall into by not exercising, and so you can actually come full circle by going too hard all the time.
Wow.
But it's so some of it is just people asking, how do I get healthier, and some of it is people asking you to just tell me that what I'm doing is right, so that if I keep doing this, that I don't
Mhm.
have to change anything, because I really don't want to, you know.
Fair enough. No, and I appreciate you sharing that. And oh, and I'm gonna kind of take what I'm about to say kind of full circle, but
Yeah.
where I want to say is like for those people that are listening that might be super out of shape, still on their couch, haven't even started working out, and we're talking about this stuff. I feel like what Paul's really at the beginning was very much saying like, don't get analysis paralysis, just start moving. Like
Yep.
you have to start somewhere. And then on the whole flip side of it, of the high intensity junkie, like you're those type of people, like be smart, listen to your body type.
Yeah.
Um, but I would be, and this will probably be my last overall question for you for this podcast because I think one, we're over an hour. Two, we could go a lot longer. There's so much more I want to pick your brain about.
Really.
But I would not be doing myself justice if I didn't ask you to tell me and any of my bodybuilder friends that are listening, why is it important for bodybuilders to do cardio even in their bulking phase?
Right. It's important to do cardio in your bulking, or any time, um,
Mhm.
and really pretty much all the time, because your
All the
heart is
time.
responsible for delivering the energy that you need to lift, whether it's for a competition, whether it's just because I want to look a certain way, or whatever. I'm trying to achieve a personal best. Um, you know, here's the thing that you can do. We've all seen the bodybuilder that sits around for 10 minutes between sets. Some of that's they're chatting with everybody, but some of it too is because there are some that just don't really do any cardio, and it takes so much longer to recover for the next set. And if your heart is
Right,
efficient and your cardiovascular system is up above par and working really, really well, then one of two things can happen. Um, and both will actually happen, but either one, you can get your workout in a little bit quicker because you're going to recover faster between sets, um, and you don't have to wait so long. And I've seen some lifters that once they kind of grasped this concept and did a few cardio tests with us, and actually periodized the cardiovascular program, like saw huge differences in how they felt for their next sets. And they're like, my later sets at the gym were way more effective than they were before, because I
yes.
felt better. And that's because you get to deliver the oxygen and the energy and the nutrients that you need to those muscles so much more efficiently. Second thing that can happen is, let's say that you still talk to the same people for 10 minutes between sets, you know, and we know that there's like a diminishing recovery each set that you do. So let's just make this like really super simple and say that you walk into the gym and you're 100% today, and you do set one, and then once you're all warmed up and ready to go, and you really get into your workout, you do your first set, and you go from 100%, and you're at like 50%, and you're recovering, and you recover up to 90% because you stood around for 10 minutes, and then you do your next set, and then you recover and you're up to like 80 or 85%. And, we know that, the longer that you go, you're just going to be spent, and you have to have, you got
Mhm.
to have, a few days to recover or whatever. Um, the thing is that you still stand around for that 10 minutes. When you have a really efficient cardiovascular system, you could be almost really close to, you won't be 100%, but you could be higher than the 90. You could be like 95,
Right.
96. And how much more effectively are you going to lift? The other thing is when do most bodybuilders get injured? It's usually as you start to fatigue. And if you are less
Mhm.
fatigued going into those later sets. Your form is better. Um, then you have a way less chance for injury as well. And those are really, really important things for bodybuilders because nobody wants to take 6 weeks off to rehab something or longer.
Right.
Man, think of what you lose, right? You're like, man, I got to recover all of this
Yeah.
ground again. And that's really where a very well functioning cardiovascular system can serve you extremely well as a bodybuilder. They say you don't have to go run, you don't have to go bike long distances. You can literally like walk on a treadmill, not even at a fast pace, and just be adjusting incline in a periodized way. So that your cardiovascular system gets stronger. You can do it on an elliptical machine or an exercise bike or whatever you want to do that and make it part of your
Mhm.
workout routine. And I would put this up against anything and say that you will see better gains as you progress later on because your form will be better. You'll be better recovered. Think about a competition. If you're actually in a competition, and you're doing, you have to lift heavier and heavier and heavier. You want to be more and more and more recovered. If you have a better
Mhm.
cardiovascular system than the guy next to you, your chances of winning are better. If you're up there and your heart rate's already jacked up, from your previous lifts and you're still trying to recover, like you're just not going to do as well. You're going to tap out sooner. You're just not going to be as successful.
I love it, and I think that also works for both those bodybuilders and those power lifters. Like, and what I'm think and I was more on the bodybuilding side, but, like, we worked with Carlos, who was on the powerlifting side.
Yeah.
But when you start when you start thinking about, like, 'cause it like we were talking about before, it all comes full circle. So, like, the big thing in, like, bodybuilding right now is, like, training a muscle group multiple times a week
Hmm.
because it's getting more volume. It makes sense, like,
Right.
oh, as long it it grows better, grows faster, whatever.
Right.
But if you combine it with better recovery, you have more you are able to be more intense because, like you were just talking about, if you can recover from 100% to you originally you would recover, take that 2-minute rest or whatever, and you're back at 90. Well, if you're at 95, you can hit that with more intensity, which means you
Absolutely.
get more out of it. Now, if your cardio is better and you trashed your legs on Monday and you're like just barely able to recover to hit your legs again on Thursday or whatever. Um, but now your cardiovascular system's better, you're recovering faster. You feel like you could have hit legs on Wednesday. How
Yep.
much better is that workout on Thursday gonna be now?
Man, it's gonna be 10 times better. I mean, right
Exactly.
from the get go too. I mean, you know how it is. You walk in and you feel the difference right away.
Oh,
You're like,
man.
oh man, like this is gonna be a slog today, or like, man, we
Yeah.
can hit this hard today. I'm feeling good. Like, wow, let's
Yeah.
do this. Yeah.
No, I love it, and thank you for answering that. Um, but Paul, we are coming up on an hour 15. Um,
All right.
so how I do wanna close this interview out, and we've talked about it before, we're gonna have you back, so don't worry about not getting enough knowledge in this one episode. There'll be plenty of knowledge to go around from Paul. Um, but if people wanted to continue a conversation with you and learn more, or heck, they may want to work with you on their cardio, how would they get in touch? Is there a way that they can do that?
Yeah. I'll just give you my email and then you can put it in your show notes or whatever as well.
For
And
sure.
people can click on that link or whatever. It's just Bengds, which is my last name, which is really crazy. So you probably have to look at it on the app or the show notes or whatever. At yahoo.com is where I'm at. And I don't really do a lot of social media anymore. I used to when I was training a lot. I find that it's better for mental stress as well because there's just so much crazy stuff out there. Um, I do miss
Yep.
keeping up with some friends. I wish Facebook was more like it used to be when it first started, with just seeing your friends and stuff. But I get tired of all the other stuff, and so I really just don't do too much social media anymore. Um, and maybe someday I will, but that's just kind of my personal thing at the moment. And I feel like I'm better for it. I like listening to podcasts. I like listening to positive things, and I pick up the news where I get the news, but I don't need it from all the social media. So unfortunately, you won't find me too much there. You'll
Sure.
find some of my stuff out there if you look for it, but it's all pretty old. So
Perfect. Thank you. And if anyone's watching on YouTube, it will be below Paul on your video. And but as always, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it's going to be in the description. Reach out to Paul. Probably pretty quick to reply. He's always been really good about that.
yeah, and I
But
love
Paul,
talking
I
about
want
this
to
stuff.
say,
In case you couldn't tell, so it's so I'm always happy to talk to people and help you get started or figure out what you want to do. Yeah.
love it. But Paul, I do want to say thank you again for coming on. We're going to 100% have multiple episodes. You and I will start game planning on what we're going to specifically cover, but I think this was a great first step. But I do seriously want to thank you for coming on and sharing
Yeah.
this information with us. And it's been very beneficial, even for me, who got to work with you for we'll just call it a year. And I'm still learning so much from you.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to being back again and to see all the people that you interview. I really appreciate this what you're doing for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Paul, once again, thank you. Say bye to the people, and
All
we'll
right.
catch you guys next time.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to episode 11 of the Helpful Huddle podcast, where I interviewed Paul Bengds about cardiovascular health and basics. Remember to give us a like and a follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter with the user handle at helpful_huddle and the YouTube channel at Helpful Huddle Podcast. You are also able to listen to us on both Spotify and Apple Podcast. The links are also found in the description below. Please reach out with your questions on topics that you would like to learn about in the future.